Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. As many celebrate Human Rights Day, some in South Africa still don't have access to basic water and electricity. Now, under the Constitution, Eskom has a statutory obligation to provide reliable electricity supply. Joining us to tell us how far we are is Steve Letsike, who's a human rights advocate. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. I suppose as you and I speak, we know that load shedding was suspended for the first time since December, Christmas Day, and South Africans were able to operate in some areas without being barred and hampered by load shedding. But it's important, of course, to realize that that in itself is a basic human right.
Indeed, of course, it is a basic human right. You would understand that this basic human right is enshrined in our Constitution, where citizens of South Africa have equal entitlement to the enjoyment of these human rights enshrined in the Constitution without any kind of discrimination. I think this social protection, and economic protection has been integrated in our Constitution for reasons where we are able to live in a standard that is adequate, that also allows citizens to literally enjoy those fundamental rights. But you'd also understand that rights comes with responsibility. And this is why the responsibility is a hard one that we always contest, we always are battling with as a country, and it requires every citizen, every government, stakeholders to be really involved in it, because it's legitimately distinctioned around how and why services are provided and how they are provided. And yet, here we are, for the first time in so many months that we have seen a suspension, which also then speaks about there is work in progress that we are seeing, but we're hoping that it can be fast-tracked where citizens can actually really enjoy these fundamental rights.
What are justifiable limitations of this fundamental right?
I think what is important, in the issue of legitimate distinction in delivering of services is to ensure that there's access, but there's responsibility towards access. You would understand electricity is bought. It's not given for free. You would also understand that the operation, even of Eskom, needs to be maintained in a high disciplined manner. There must be a well-resourced oil, that speaks to human, technical, and financial in running these services. Now, South Africans have not necessarily been able to refuse to pay for these services. Yes, municipalities have demonstrated the limited ability to actually collect resources from the people to ensure that they pay for Eskom services. And we've seen such issues of governance. So the limitation is whether the administration has been adequately oiled and effective to collect these collection of services from people that pays for it and that need to pay for it, because now the burden that we are seeing is between those who pay and those who do not pay for services, and those who also are unable to pay for services. So we need to be able to distinguish some of the vulnerability, but we also need to speak about the responsibility that comes with it. And this is why we see limitations to whether the service providers are able to keep up with what is required for that matter.
How can this violation be remedied? I mean, we're hearing of all the grand plans that are taking place. I mean, as you and I speak, we know that Electricity Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa is on a tour visiting the various power stations across the country. He's at Kusile at the moment. But is that enough? And what does it mean for the end user, the South African?
I think the fact that the president declared this as a matter of crisis, it determined the urgency of interest of people being put first. That's number one. And also accepting and, really some of the challenges that the system have been operating in. Now, the question of whether this is enough, I don't think it's a question that we can articulate and say it's enough or it's not enough. It's actually then we have to articulate what all of us as citizens as government, as civil society, as private sector, are prepared to do to remedy this. The first thing that we need to also act on is to deal with the complacency that we've seen within the system of Eskom. Any incompetence that is within the system really must be out of the system, because it's really hampering on service delivery. We cannot sit where there's corruption. There must be, people must be met with the mighty or the might of the law. Where there is injustices, we must be able to repair those. And I think that's what the crisis mode as disaster declared by President needs to respond on. It then determines us acting on it, or as all stakeholders, including citizens. How do we actually even spare the burden that we are seeing, that the system is overloaded, overwhelmed, and how we respond to it? So I think the response doesn't only speak to what government can do, but all of us can actually play a role in turning the tide. For us as South Africa, we can turn the tide if we work together around this.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. Human rights advocate Steve Letsike speaking to us there about, of course, the impact of the power crisis, that in itself being a human rights violation, but responsibility also lies with the South African. Now,